The message arrived on every screen across Earth at exactly 1447 Universal Time. Televisions, computers, phones, even the giant display boards in city centers all showed the same thing. A massive alien ship hung in orbit above Earth, blocking out stars with its dark metal hull. The ship was bigger than anything humans had ever built. It looked like a city made of weapons. The alien who appeared on screen had gray skin and 4 arms. His eyes were dark and cold. He wore armor that shimmered with strange colors. Behind him stood other aliens of different shapes and sizes. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few looked like they were made of living stone. This was the Vakrish Empire, and they ruled over 12 different alien species across 400 star systems. People of Earth, the alien said. His voice was translated into every human language automatically. I am Ambassador General Threx of the Vakrish Empire. We have come to bring order to your primitive world. You have 72 hours to surrender. You will give us control of all your territories. You will provide 40% of your population to work in our colonies. You will destroy all weapons and submit to our rule. If you refuse, we will take what we need by force. This is not a negotiation. This is a declaration of war. The transmission ended. For a few seconds, the world was silent. Then the phones started ringing. News channels exploded with panic. People ran into the streets. Some screamed, others cried. Parents grabbed their children and headed for shelters. It seemed like the end of the world. But in the command center deep beneath the Atlantic Ocean, the reaction was very different. Admiral Tae-Yong Kim stood in front of a wall of monitors showing the alien ship. He was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes. He had fought in the Mars independence conflicts 20 years ago when colonists on Mars tried to break away from Earth. He knew war. He knew strategy. And right now, he was smiling. They finally showed up, he said quietly. Around him, military officers rushed to their stations. Screens lit up with data about the alien ship. Numbers scrolled past showing weapon counts, energy readings, and shield strength. Every piece of information was being analyzed. Sir, should we prepare evacuation protocols? Asked a young officer. His hands were shaking as he typed commands into his console. No, Admiral Tae-Yong said. Tell everyone to stay calm. This is exactly what we've been waiting for. Across the command center, heads turned. The young officer looked confused. Sir, they have a ship the size of a small moon. They rule hundreds of worlds. How can we possibly fight them? Admiral Tae-Yong walked over to a private console and entered a code. A new screen appeared showing files marked with the highest security clearance. Because we've been watching them for 80 years, we know everything about them. We know how they fight, what weapons they use, and what mistakes they make. We've been preparing for this day since before you were born. The officer's mouth fell open. We knew they were coming? We knew someone was coming, the admiral said. When we developed quantum fold telescopes, we could suddenly see everything happening within 1,000 light years. We watched civilizations rise and fall. We saw wars fought with weapons we'd never imagined. And we saw the Vakrish Empire conquering world after world. They always pick the same targets. Peaceful species that haven't developed strong militaries. Species within 50 light years of their borders. Earth was always going to be next on their list. Meanwhile, in the capital city, President Sung Ho-yoon sat in his office with his advisors. He was a calm man who had once been a military strategist before entering politics. He knew how to keep a cool head in crisis. His advisors were arguing loudly about what to do. Some wanted to surrender. Others wanted to fight. A few suggested hiding underground or fleeing to the outer colonies. President Yoon raised his hand, and the room went quiet. Get me a direct channel to the alien ship, he said. His assistant looked nervous, but made the connection. Within seconds, Ambassador General Threx appeared on the screen again. The alien looked surprised that humans were calling him back so quickly. "You wish to surrender already?" Threx asked. His voice carried a tone of satisfaction. "A wise choice. We received your message," President Yoon interrupted. He was smiling. It wasn't a nervous smile or a fake diplomatic smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something others didn't. "Your 72 hours start now. I suggest you use them wisely." The transmission cut off. Threx stared at the blank screen in confusion. Around him, his officers looked at each other with concern. That wasn't how conquered species behaved. There should have been begging, or crying, or anger. Not a smile. Not that kind of confidence. "Run a full scan of their planet," Threx ordered. "I want to know everything about their military capabilities. Something isn't right here." On the moon, Captain Biora Choi climbed into her fighter cockpit. She was one of the best pilots in the Luna Wing, a squadron of 500 fighters stationed at the moon's hidden military base. The base had been built inside an old crater and covered with holographic projections to look like normal lunar surface. The Vakresh wouldn't know it existed until it was too late. Biora ran through her pre-flight checks with practiced ease. Her fighter looked old and primitive on the outside. It used chemical rockets and basic kinetic weapons. But inside, it was packed with technology that Vakresh had never seen. Neural link systems that connected directly to her brain. Quantum processors that could calculate flight paths faster than any alien computer. Adaptive armor that could shift and change to deflect different types of attacks. "All pilots ready?" Her squadron leader's voice came through her helmet. Around her, hundreds of other pilots gave their confirmations. They had trained for this moment in simulations for years. They knew the Vakresh battle patterns. They knew their weaknesses. They knew exactly how to fight. "Remember," the squadron leader said, "they think we're primitive. They think our weapons are toys. Let them believe it right up until the moment we prove them wrong." Back at the research facility in Geneva, Dr. Haewon Park stared at a device that looked like a metal sphere covered in equations. It was a quantum disruption. Mine, something she had spent 15 years developing. The device could freeze matter in temporal stasis by disrupting the quantum bonds that held atoms together. It was a weapon the Vakresh had never encountered because their science hadn't discovered that particular branch of physics yet. "How many did we deploy?" she asked her assistant. 40,000 satellites in orbit around Earth," the assistant replied. "Another 20,000 around Mars. 15,000 in the asteroid belt. Each one contains 50 mines. They're all in stealth mode. The Vakresh scans won't detect them." Dr. Haewon nodded. "Good. When they attack, they'll fly right into the net." The 72 hours began to count down. Across Earth, the initial panic began to fade as government announcements spread the word. "Stay calm. Trust the military. Everything is under control." People didn't understand how their leaders could be so confident, but the calm certainty in official voices was reassuring. In space, the Vakresh fleet began to gather. More ships arrived through faster-than-light jumps. 3,000 warships total, all bristling with plasma cannons and energy weapons. It was the standard invasion force that had conquered dozens of worlds. Threx watched the fleet assemble and felt his confidence return. So what if the humans seemed calm? They would learn fear soon enough. But on Earth, in command centers and military bases and research facilities, humans prepared for war with the careful precision of a species that had been fighting itself for 10,000 years. They had studied every war in human history, learned from every mistake, and created weapons specifically designed to counter everything the Vakresh could do. Admiral Tae-yang looked at the countdown timer. 68 hours remaining. He smiled again and spoke into his communicator to all military commands worldwide. "They think they're the predators," he said. Let's teach them what happens when you hunt humanity. The Vakresh attack came at hour 68, 4 hours before the deadline. Ambassador General Threx believed in surprise attacks. Every species the Vakresh had conquered fell for the same trick. Make them wait and worry, then strike early when they're still preparing. It had worked 400 times across 400 star systems. 3,000 Vakresh warships appeared around Earth in perfect formation. They came out of faster-than-light transit in coordinated groups. Some appeared near Earth. Others materialized around Mars. A third wave emerged near the asteroid belt, where human mining colonies extracted resources. It was a standard pincer movement, designed to divide enemy forces and destroy them piece by piece. On the flagship of the Vakresh fleet, Threx watched his tactical displays with satisfaction. The human defenses looked pathetic. A few hundred ships in orbit, some satellites that seemed to be communications equipment, a couple of space stations that probably held civilians. There were no massive defense platforms or energy shields protecting the planet. The humans had nothing. Begin the assault, Threx commanded. Target their military installations first. Leave the cities intact. We'll need the infrastructure when we occupy the planet. 3,000 alien warships powered up their weapons. Plasma cannons glowed with deadly energy. Missile bays opened. Energy shields flickered into full strength. The Vakresh crews were confident and relaxed. This would be over in hours, maybe less. Then they could celebrate another easy conquest. The moment the Vakresh fleet fired their first shots, everything went wrong. 40,000 hidden satellites around Earth suddenly activated. They had been floating in space, disguised as debris and old equipment. Now they revealed their true purpose. Each satellite split open and released 50 quantum disruption mines. 2 million mines filled the space around Earth in seconds, creating an invisible web that the Vakresh ships flew straight into. The mines didn't explode. They did something much worse. When a Vakresh ship touched one, a mine activated and created a field of quantum disruption. The field interfered with the fundamental forces that held matter together. Ship reactors froze mid-reaction. Weapons stopped charging. Life support systems shut down. The ships didn't explode or burn. They just stopped working. They became dead metal floating in space. In 4.7 seconds, 1,800 Vakresh warships turned into useless debris. Their crews were alive but trapped inside ships with no power, no weapons, and no way to call for help. The quantum disruption blocked all their communications. Threx stared at his displays in shock. More than half his fleet was gone. Just gone, not destroyed, not retreating. Simply frozen in place like insects trapped in amber. His analysts were screaming information at him, but nothing made sense. How could primitive humans have weapons that advanced? Their technology was supposed to be centuries behind the Vakresh. All ships, emergency evasion. Threx shouted. Retreat to fallback positions. But it was too late for many of them. The mines were everywhere. Ships trying to escape ran into more mines and froze. Others collided with their own disabled vessels. The perfect formation became chaos. That's when the human fighters launched. From hidden bases on the moon, from underground facilities on Earth, from hollowed-out asteroids in the belt. 500 human fighters emerged. They looked primitive compared to Vakresh ships. They used chemical rockets instead of anti-gravity drives. They had kinetic weapons instead of energy cannons. To Vakresh sensors, they seemed like relics from a less advanced age. Captain Biora Choi led Luna Wing straight into the chaos of the Vakresh fleet. Her neural link connected her brain directly to her fighter systems. She could think a command, and the ship would respond instantly. Every other pilot had the same connection. They moved like one organism, each fighter perfectly coordinated with the others. The Vakresh ships that remained active tried to shoot down the fighters. Energy beams lashed out, but the human ships moved in patterns the aliens had never seen. They used Earth's gravity well to slingshot around the planet, building speed that no Vakrish computer could calculate fast enough to target. They flew through debris fields that Vakrish sensors said were impossible to navigate. They moved in 3 dimensions, while Vakrish tactics assumed 2-dimensional thinking. B. Ora locked onto a Vakrish cruiser and fired. Her weapons were tungsten penetrators, solid metal rods accelerated to 30 kilometers per second. The Vakrish ship's energy shields were designed to stop plasma and lasers. The shields did nothing against solid matter moving that fast. The tungsten rod punched through the shield like it wasn't there, through the hull and out the other side. The cruiser vented atmosphere and spun out of control. Target their bridge sections, Beora commanded her wing. Disable, but don't destroy. We want prisoners. All around Earth, the same scene played out. Human fighters danced through space, striking with precision and speed that seemed impossible. A young pilot named Daihayan Lai found himself being chased by 3 Vakrish fighters through an asteroid field near Mars. The Vakrish pilots were good, but they hesitated when flying near the asteroids. They worried about collisions. Daihayan didn't hesitate. He had trained in simulators for 10,000 hours. He knew exactly how his ship would respond to every command. He dove between 2 asteroids, so close together that his wings scraped both surfaces. The Vakrish fighters tried to follow. 2 of them collided with the asteroids and exploded. The 3rd pulled up and retreated. Daihayan circled back and disabled its engines with a precise shot. The Vakrish tried their biological weapons next. They launched missiles containing engineered viruses designed to devastate human populations. The viruses were lethal to carbon-based life forms with DNA similar to what Vakrish databases said humans had. The missiles opened in Earth's atmosphere and released their deadly cargo. Nothing happened. The viruses fell harmlessly to the ground, where automated collection systems gathered them for study. The Vakrish didn't know that humans had been preparing for biological warfare for centuries. Every person on Earth had been given nanoscale medical implants that monitored and protected against any biological threat. The viruses couldn't even reach human cells before being identified and neutralized. But more importantly, the Vakrish made a critical error in their thinking. They assumed human fighter pilots were in their ships, flying manually in space. They weren't. Every fighter in combat was controlled by neural link from deep underground bunkers. The pilots lay in protective pods, their minds connected to their ships, but their bodies safe on Earth. Even if a ship was destroyed, the pilot would simply disconnect and link to another fighter. Admiral Taeyang watched the battle from his command center with calm satisfaction. Everything was going exactly as planned. The quantum disruption mines had worked perfectly. The fighters were performing better than expected. The Vakrish were panicking, making mistakes, falling into patterns that human strategists had predicted years ago. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Vakrish flagship," an officer reported. "They're requesting a ceasefire." "Denied," Admiral Taeyang said without hesitation. "Open a channel to their entire fleet." His face appeared on every Vakrish ship's display. The alien crews stared at the human admiral, who had just destroyed most of their fleet with weapons they didn't understand and tactics they couldn't. "Counter, you came to Earth expecting easy prey," Admiral Taeyang said. His voice was calm and cold. "You've spent centuries conquering species that never learned to fight. But humanity is different. We've been teaching ourselves warfare for 10,000 years. We've fought each other in every way imaginable. We've invented weapons that would give you nightmares. We've studied strategy until it became art. You wanted war. Now you're going to learn what humanity has been practicing all this time." The transmission ended. The battle continued. By hour 72, the original deadline the Vakrish had given, Their invasion force was destroyed. Of 3,000 ships, only 600 remained functional. 2,400 were either frozen by quantum mines or crippled by kinetic weapons. The survivors were fleeing toward the edge of the solar system, trying to reach the minimum distance needed for faster-than-light jump. Threx sat in his command chair, his forearms shaking. His advisors were dead silent. They had never lost a battle before. The Vakresh Empire had been conquering worlds for 500 years without a single defeat. And now, in less than 4 hours, a species they thought was primitive had destroyed them. "Send a message to the Grand Council," Threx said quietly. "Tell them we have encountered something unexpected. Tell them humans are not what we thought. Tell them we need reinforcements." But in the back of his mind, Threx wondered if reinforcements would be enough. He had seen human tactics, human weapons, human precision. They fought like they had been preparing for this exact battle. They moved like they knew every move the Vakresh would make before they made it. It was impossible. Unless they had been watching. Unless they had been studying the Vakresh for years. Unless every battle the Vakresh had ever fought had been observed and analyzed and turned into training data. The thought made Threx feel cold. On Earth, the celebrations were loud but brief. The military knew this was just the first battle. The Vakresh Empire was huge. They would send more ships. But Admiral Taeyang wasn't worried. He had a plan that went far beyond just defending Earth. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. "We're not going to sit here and wait for them to regroup. We're taking the fight to them." His officers looked shocked. Attack the Vakresh Empire? Go on the offensive? That was insane. That was brilliant. That was exactly what the Vakresh would never expect. President Sung Ho-yoon appeared on the command center screen. "Admiral, are you sure about this? We just defeated their invasion force. We could negotiate from a position of strength." "Mr. President," Admiral Taeyang replied, "they declared war on Earth. They came to enslave us. We can negotiate after we make sure they never try this again. Right now, we need to show them that attacking humanity was the biggest mistake they ever made." President Yoon was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Do what needs to be done. But remember, we're fighting to protect ourselves, not to become conquerors." "Understood, sir," the Admiral said, within hours. Earth's defense fleet began preparing for an offensive operation. Ships that had been hidden throughout the solar system emerged and gathered. These weren't the primitive-looking fighters that had destroyed the Vakresh invasion force. These were humanity's true warships, built in secret over decades, equipped with weapons that would make the quantum disruption mines look simple by comparison. Survivors of the Vakresh fleet finally reached the edge of the solar system and jumped away to faster-than-light speed. They thought they were escaping to regroup and plan their next attack. They had no idea that human ships were already following them, equipped with improved faster-than-light drives that were twice as fast as anything the Vakresh had ever built. The hunt had begun. The Vakresh survivors fled to their staging system, called Talvex Prime, a fortress world located 15 light-years from Earth. It was a massive military base, built on a moon orbiting a gas giant. The Vakresh had used Talvex Prime as their launching point for 100 conquests. It had never been attacked. It was considered completely safe. Ambassador General Threx arrived at Talvex Prime with his broken fleet and immediately called for reinforcements. The Grand Council of the Vakresh Empire sent 5,000 ships from across their territory. It was the largest fleet the Empire had ever assembled. They were angry and embarrassed. No primitive species had ever humiliated them like this. The Grand Council wanted revenge, and they wanted Earth, crushed completely. While the Vakresh fleet gathered and prepared their defenses, they received something unexpected. A transmission from Earth, sent on all Vakrish communication channels. It wasn't a request for peace. It wasn't a surrender. It was a history lesson. Dr. Hay-Won Park had compiled the transmission personally. She was a scientist, but she understood psychology. She knew how to use information as a weapon. The transmission showed footage from human history. Ancient wars fought with swords and spears. Medieval sieges that lasted years. The world wars of the 20th century that killed millions. Nuclear weapons that could destroy cities in seconds. Chemical weapons. Biological weapons. Weapons designed not just to kill, but to terrify. The footage showed humans fighting humans with brutal efficiency. It showed tactical innovations that changed warfare forever. It showed humans learning from every defeat and turning that knowledge into victory. And it showed one clear message. Humanity had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of war while fighting the only enemy that could match them. Themselves. Vakrish analysts watched the transmission with growing horror. Their own military history was simple. They had developed space travel and found primitive worlds to conquer. They had never fought an equal opponent. They had never needed to innovate. They had never been pushed to develop truly devastating weapons because they had never faced a real threat. This changes nothing, Threx told his officers, but his voice lacked confidence. We have superior numbers. We have fortifications. We have the advantage. 3 days after the transmission, human ships arrived at Talvex Prime. The Vakrish defense fleet consisted of 5,000 warships arranged in a defensive sphere around the moon. Energy shields overlapped to create layers of protection. Orbital weapons platforms covered every approach vector. Mines filled the space between defensive positions. It was a fortress that could withstand any assault. Admiral Taeyang brought 800 ships. The Vakrish commanders saw this and laughed. 800 against 5,000? Plus all their defenses? The humans were either insane or suicidal. They're going to regret coming here, a Vakrish fleet commander said. We'll destroy them and then go back to finish Earth properly. The battle began with Admiral Taeyang doing something the Vakrish didn't expect. He broadcast another message, this time directly to the Vakrish fleet. But this message wasn't for the commanders. It was for the individual species that made up the Vakrish Empire. Soldiers of the Nethril, the admiral said, naming one of the 12 species in the empire. We know you were conquered 200 years ago. Your people didn't choose this war. The Vakrish forced you to fight. We're not here to destroy you. We're here to free you. He addressed each species in the fleet, speaking directly to the conquered peoples who had been forced to serve in the Vakrish military. It was psychological warfare on a scale the Vakrish had never encountered. Within minutes, confusion spread through the fleet. Some ships stopped responding to commands. Others moved out of formation. The Vakrish Central Command had to waste precious time dealing with internal problems instead of coordinating their defense. Then the human attack began. And it was unlike anything the Vakrish expected. Human ships didn't charge in straight lines. They moved in swarm patterns, like schools of fish or flocks of birds. Individual ships seemed unimportant. The entire fleet moved as one living organism. When the Vakrish fired at one section, the swarm simply flowed around the attack and struck from a different angle. When the Vakrish tried to predict their movements, a pattern changed. The Vakrish used their standard tactics. Concentrated firepower on single targets. Energy weapons designed to overwhelm shields. Formation flying that created overlapping fields of fire. All the tactics that had worked on 400 conquered worlds, but humans had studied those tactics. Every battle the Vakrish had ever fought had been observed through quantum-fold telescopes. Human strategists had analyzed every engagement and found every weakness. Now they exploited those weaknesses with surgical precision. Captain Iora Choi led a wing of fighters in a maneuver that should have been impossible. They flew straight at a group of Vakresh cruisers, fired missiles that the Vakresh easily shot down, then seemed to retreat. The Vakresh ships pursued them, thinking it was an easy victory. But the missiles they had destroyed were decoys, kamikaze drones that looked like crude vessels on Vakresh sensors. While the enemy was distracted shooting down unmanned drones, the real human ships flanked them and struck at their vulnerable engine sections. Vakresh cruisers were disabled in 30 seconds. Their crews were unharmed, but their ships were dead in space. It was a tactic the Vakresh had never encountered, because they never fought enemies smart enough to use it. The Vakresh tried to adapt. They changed formations. They developed new firing patterns. But every time they changed tactics, the humans were ready with a counter. It was like fighting an enemy who could read minds. What the Vakresh didn't know was that human ships had quantum computers running simulations in real time. Every Vakresh move was predicted 3 steps ahead based on their historical patterns in one section of the battle. A young engineer named Hyun-Woo Nam was working frantically aboard the human flagship. He was watching Vakresh weapons fire and analyzing the energy signatures. Within minutes, he figured out how their plasma cannons worked and found a weakness. He modified the human ship shields to absorb plasma energy instead of deflecting it, then designed a system to store that energy in capacitors and fire it back amplified. "Admiral," he reported, "we can turn their own weapons against them." "Do it," Admiral Tae-yang ordered. Human ships began moving into Vakresh weapons fire deliberately. It looked like suicide. The Vakresh commanders couldn't believe their luck. The humans were making terrible mistakes. They increased their rate of fire, pouring more energy into the human ships, and the human ships returned fire. But instead of using their own weapons, they released all the stored plasma energy they had absorbed from Vakresh attacks. The energy came back doubled in intensity. Vakresh ships that thought they were winning suddenly found themselves hit by their own amplified weapons. Shields collapsed. Hulls burned. Ships spun out of control. The tactic became known as the Terran maneuver. Military analysts across the galaxy would study it for decades. It was brilliant because it required no special weapons, just an understanding of physics and the ability to turn an enemy's strength into their weakness. The space battle raged for 18 hours. But Admiral Tae-yang knew that the real war wouldn't be won in space. It would be won on the ground. Talvex Prime had to fall completely. The Vakresh had to understand that nowhere was safe from human determination. Colonel Jin-Woo An led the ground assault. He commanded 3,000 Marines, specially trained for combat in alien environments. The Vakresh expected ground troops in heavy armor moving slowly across the moon's surface. Instead, humans deployed in pressure suits designed for extreme mobility. Talvex Prime was a low-gravity moon. Humans used this to their advantage. They moved in 3 dimensions, using the weak gravity to bound over obstacles, land on walls, attack from above and below. The Vakresh defenders, evolved on a high-gravity world, were slow and clumsy in comparison. Their training assumed enemies would move along the ground. They had no doctrine for fighting enemies who could jump 50 meters or run along vertical surfaces. The battle for Talvex, Prime's main military base, was brutal but quick. Human Marines moved through the facility like they were flowing water, finding every weakness and exploiting it. They used non-lethal weapons where possible, trying to minimize casualties among conquered species who had been forced to fight. But against Vakresh commanders who refused to surrender, they showed no mercy. Colonel An personally led the assault on the command center. He moved through corridors with his squad, their pressure suits making them almost invisible on Vakresh thermal sensors. They reached the command center, where Vakresh officers were coordinating the defense. The Marines burst in simultaneously from 3 different entrances, moving faster than the defenders could react. "You're under arrest for war crimes against humanity," Colonel Ahn said. His weapon pointed at the ranking Vakrish officer. "Surrender now, and you'll be treated according to military law." The Vakrish officer looked at the human with disbelief. "We are the Vakrish Empire. We do not surrender to prey species." "Then you'll be the first," Colonel Ahn replied. His Marines moved forward, and the Vakrish defenders realized they had no choice. They put down their weapons. While the battle continued, something unexpected happened. Intelligence officer Yu-Jin Song was monitoring Vakrish communications from the human flagship. She had learned their language patterns and was decrypting their messages in real time. She discovered that 3 species within the Vakrish fleet were having heated debates among their crews. The Nethril, the Quarren, and the Halvik species were discussing whether to continue fighting. They had seen the transmission showing human military history. They had seen how effectively humans fought, and they were questioning why they should die for an empire that had conquered their world centuries ago. "Admiral," Yu-Jin reported, 3 species are about to break from the Vakrish fleet. If we time this right, we can turn this into a complete collapse of their alliance." Admiral Taeyang immediately broadcast a new message to the Nethril, Quarren, and Halvex vessels. "Earth offers you peace. Stand down now, and we guarantee your safety. Return to your homeworlds. You don't have to die for those who enslaved you." Within an hour, a quarter of the Vakrish fleet powered down their weapons and moved away from the battle. Ships carrying Nethril, Quarren, and Halvex crews announced they were withdrawing from the war. Some Vakrish commanders tried to stop them and were destroyed by their own former allies. The defensive sphere collapsed. The fortress fell apart from within. On the surface of Talvex Prime, Colonel Ahn stood on the highest point of a military base and watched the Earth flag being raised. It was a symbolic gesture, but an important one. Humanity had taken the fight to the enemy's stronghold and won decisively. The Battle of Talvex Prime ended after 27 hours of combat. The Vakrish Empire lost 4,200 ships. Humanity lost 93 vessels. The difference wasn't just in technology. It was in thinking, in tactics, in the willingness to innovate in real time. Humanity fought like they had been preparing for this specific enemy for years. Because they had, Ambassador General Threx was captured by human Marines. As they led him away in restraints, he asked Colonel Ahn a question that had been haunting him. "How did you know? How did you know exactly how we would fight?" Colonel Ahn looked at the defeated alien commander. "Because we've been watching you conquer worlds for 80 years. We studied every battle. We analyzed every tactic. You've been our final exam, and we've been preparing for decades. You never had a chance." News of the victory at Talvex Prime spread across the Vakrish Empire at the speed of light. 3 species had openly withdrawn from the war. A fortress that had never fallen had been captured in a single day. The human fleet was still coming, pushing deeper into Vakrish territory. And for the first time in 500 years, the Vakrish Empire felt fear. The human fleet stood at the edge of Vakrish space, 3 jumps from their homeworld. Admiral Taeyang looked at the tactical displays, showing the route to the heart of the Vakrish Empire. His ships could reach it in 36 hours. They had the weapons. They had the advantage. They could end this war by destroying the Vakrish ability to ever threaten anyone again. But back on Earth, a debate was raging that would determine the future of humanity's place in the galaxy. President Sung Ho-yoon called an emergency session of the Global Council. Representatives from every nation on Earth gathered in the assembly hall. The question before them was simple but profound. Should humanity continue the offensive and crush the Vakrish Empire completely, or should they stop now and offer terms of surrender? Admiral Taeyang appeared on the main screen, broadcasting from his flagship. "We have them defeated," he said. "3 of their subject species have already withdrawn from the war. Their military is scattered. Their morale is broken. If we push forward now, we can ensure they never threaten humanity or any other species again. We can end this permanently. By becoming conquerors?" President Yoon asked. "By doing exactly what they tried to do to us?" The Admiral's jaw tightened. "By protecting ourselves. They declared war on us. They came to enslave 40% of our population. Do we just forgive that and hope they've learned their lesson? What happens in 50 years when they rebuild and try again?" Dr. Hae-won Park stood to speak. She had been working non-stop since the war began, developing weapons and analyzing alien technology. Now she looked exhausted and troubled. "I've been studying the Vakresh for months now," she said. "I've examined their culture and their history. They're not evil. They're just successful. They developed space travel and found weaker species to dominate. It worked for 500 years. They never had to question whether it was right, because no one was strong enough to stop them. Until us. That doesn't excuse what they did," said a council member from Africa. "They would have enslaved billions of humans." "No, it doesn't excuse it," Dr. Hae-won agreed. "But if we become the ones who conquer and destroy, how are we different? We went to space to explore and learn, not to build an empire on the ashes of defeated enemies." Captain Baeyera Choi was also present at the council session. She had been given leave from her squadron to testify. She stood before the assembly still wearing her flight suit. Her hands shook slightly as she spoke. Everyone in the room knew she had lost her brother during the defense of Luna. "My brother Minho died defending Earth," she said quietly. "He was a fighter pilot like me. His ship was hit by plasma fire in the first battle. I watched him die. So believe me when I say I understand the desire for revenge. I want the Vakresh to pay for what they did. But my brother didn't die so we could become conquerors. He died defending home. There's a difference." A senator named Nari Kwan took the floor. She was known for her passionate speeches and her firm beliefs about humanity's moral responsibility. "We have won something incredibly important," she said. "We won the right to be feared. Every species in this part of the galaxy now knows that humanity is not prey. We are predators if we need to be. But now comes a harder choice. Do we earn the right to be trusted? Do we show the galaxy that humans can be strong and merciful? Or do we prove that power corrupts everyone eventually?" The debate continued for hours. Military commanders argued for completing the offensive. Civilian leaders argued for restraint. Scientists presented data about the Vakresh Empire's structure. Philosophers discussed the nature of justice versus revenge. The entire world watched and argued along with their representatives. Meanwhile, in a cell aboard the human flagship, Ambassador General Threx sat in silence. He had been given basic accommodations and was treated according to military law regarding prisoners of war. Human guards brought him food and water. A doctor checked his health. It was confusing. The Vakresh didn't treat prisoners this well. Conquered enemies were either enslaved or executed. A human intelligence officer named Dongwu Shin came to interview him. Dongwu had been rescued from a Vakresh prison ship that was captured during the battle at Talvex Prime. He had spent 3 weeks in Vakresh captivity before being freed. The guards had him testify before the Global Council via video link. "Tell them what you saw," the council president requested. Dong-Wu described the conditions on the prison ship. "It wasn't torture exactly. The Vakresh didn't waste energy being cruel. They were simply efficient. Prisoners were kept alive with minimal resources and put to work immediately. No one was beaten or starved, but no one was treated as a person either. They were resources to be used up and replaced. But here's what you need to understand, Dongwu said. Most of the species working on that ship weren't there by choice. They were conquered peoples like the Nethril or the Quarren. They had families back on their homeworlds being held to ensure cooperation. The Vakresh Empire isn't just the Vakresh. It's 12 species, and most of them are prisoners who've been prisoners so long they forgot what freedom looks like. This testimony changed the tone of the debate. If the Vakresh Empire was destroyed completely, what happened to the conquered species? They were victims too, even if they had been forced to fight against humanity. A new faction emerged in the debate. These people argued for a middle path. Accept Vakresh surrender, but with strict conditions. War crime tribunals for the leadership who ordered the invasion. Reparations paid over time. Complete demilitarization of Vakresh forces. And freedom for the conquered species to choose their own future. While Earth debated, something unexpected happened. A new player entered the situation. The Korvax Dominion, a militaristic empire from a neighboring region of space, sent a diplomatic ship to meet the human fleet. They had been watching the war with great interest. Their envoy, a tall alien with blue crystalline skin named Vextar, met with Admiral Taeyang aboard the flagship. "Impressive victories," Vextar said. "Your species has proven itself capable. The Korvax Dominion respects strength. We have a proposal." "I'm listening," the Admiral replied cautiously. "The Vakresh are weak now. Their empire is crumbling. Together, we could divide their territory between us. The Korvax would gain the eastern sectors. Humanity would take the western sectors. We would both benefit greatly. It's a simple arrangement between predators dividing prey." Admiral Taeyang studied the alien carefully. This was a test. The Korvax wanted to see what kind of species humanity really was. Would they jump at the chance to gain territory and resources? Or would they reject the offer? "I need to discuss this with my government," the Admiral said diplomatically. "But I can tell you now that humanity doesn't make decisions about other species' futures without their input." Vextar's expression was hard to read on his crystalline features. "How noble. We'll await your answer. But remember, in this galaxy, the strong do what they will, and the weak suffer what they must. Choose which category humanity wants to fall into." The envoy's ship departed, leaving Admiral Taeyang with a growing concern. Earth had proven itself in war, but now they faced a different kind of challenge. How they handled victory would determine how the galaxy saw them for generations to come. Back on Earth, the Global Council was reaching a decision. President Yoon called for a final vote. The question was simple: continue the offensive to ensure permanent victory, or offer conditional surrender that emphasized justice over conquest. That Senator Narai gave one final speech before the vote. "My friends, we stand at a moment that will define who we are as a species. Yes, the Vakresh tried to enslave us. Yes, they deserve punishment. But if we respond to attempted slavery with conquest, we become the very thing we're fighting against. Humanity has always been at its best when we reached for higher ideals, even when it was difficult. Especially when it was difficult. We have the strength to destroy. Let's prove we also have the wisdom to build something better." The vote was close but decisive. Earth would offer the Vakresh conditional surrender. War crimes would be prosecuted. Reparations would be paid. The military would be dismantled. But there would be no conquest, no occupation, no empire building. Admiral Taeyang received the orders and felt conflicting emotions. Part of him wanted to finish what they started. The soldier in him understood that defeated enemies could become future threats. But he was also a man who believed in following civilian authority. The people of Earth had spoken through their representatives. He sent a message to the Vakresh Grand Council. Earth offers you surrender with honor. Lay down your weapons. Submit your leadership for war crimes tribunals. Pay reparations to the families of those who died defending our world. Do these things, and we will not destroy you. We will instead work toward a peace that benefits all species, including yours. The message included detailed terms and a 48-hour deadline. The entire galaxy watched and waited to see how the Vakresh would respond. On the Vakresh homeworld, the Grand Council met in emergency session. They were terrified. They expected humanity to arrive with weapons, ready to destroy their cities. Instead, they received an offer that seemed impossible. Mercy from those they had tried to enslave? Some council members wanted to reject it and fight to the end. Others saw it as the only way to survive. They argued through the night while their people watched the skies in fear. Captain Biora returned to her squadron after testifying at the council. Her pilots gathered around her, asking what would happen next. I don't know, she admitted. We won the war. Now we have to figure out how to win the peace. That might be even harder. One of her pilots, the young Dehayan who had survived the asteroid field battle, asked the question they were all thinking. Ma'am, do you think we made the right choice? Showing mercy instead of strength? Biora looked at her pilots, seeing in their faces the same doubt she felt. I think mercy is strength, she said finally. Anyone can destroy. It takes real strength to build. My brother died defending that idea. I'm not going to let his sacrifice be for nothing by turning. Use into the monsters we fought against. The 48 hours counted down while humanity waited to see if the Vakresh would choose survival or pride. The Vakresh Grand Council sent their response with 3 hours, remaining on the deadline. They accepted Earth's terms. The war was over, not with a final battle or a dramatic last stand, but with a transmission accepting surrender. It felt anticlimactic to many humans who had been preparing for continued fighting. But those who understood strategy knew that sometimes the greatest victories come without firing another shot. 6 months later, representatives from Earth, the Vakresh homeworld, and 14 other species gathered at a neutral space station called Unity Point. The station had been built specifically for these negotiations, funded equally by all parties. It floated in neutral space between territories, a symbol of the new order that was trying to emerge. The Treaty of Terra, as it came to be called, took 3 months to negotiate. The terms were complex, but the principles were simple. The Vakresh Empire would be dissolved. Each conquered species would have the choice to remain allied with the Vakresh or become independent. War crime tribunals would be held for Vakresh, leadership who planned and executed the invasion of Earth. Reparations would be paid to Earth over 50 years. And most controversially, Earth would share its defensive technology with any species that requested it. This last point caused heated debate even among humans. We're giving away our advantages, some military commanders argued. We spent decades developing these weapons in secret. Now we're just handing them to potential enemies? Dr. Haewon Park defended the decision in a broadcast that was transmitted across 400 star systems. We're not giving away weapons, she explained. We're sharing knowledge of defensive systems. Quantum disruption mines that disable ships without destroying them. Shield technology that protects against energy weapons. Detection systems that prevent surprise attacks. We're teaching the galaxy how to defend themselves so that empires like the Vakresh can never rise again through conquest. The interview became one of the most watched broadcasts in galactic history. Billions of beings across hundreds of worlds watched this human scientist explain Earth's philosophy. The Vakresh Empire conquered 400 worlds, she said. They succeeded because those worlds couldn't defend themselves. We're changing that. We're giving every species the tools to say no to conquest. Some will use those tools against us someday, maybe. But we'd rather live in a galaxy where everyone is strong than a galaxy where we're strong and everyone else is prey. The war crime tribunals began at Unity Point. Ambassador General Threx and 47 other Vakrish commanders were charged with crimes against sentient beings. The trials were broadcast publicly. Evidence was presented showing the planning of the Earth invasion, the decision to demand 40% of the human population as slaves, and the authorization to use biological weapons. The trials were fair but thorough. Threx was allowed legal representation. He could present his defense. The prosecutors had to prove their case with evidence, not just accusations. Many species watching the trials were shocked. They had never seen a justice system that treated defeated enemies with such care. Threx's defense was simple. "We did what we have always done," he testified. "We are the Vakrish Empire. We conquer. It is our nature. We have done this for 500 years across 400 worlds. Why are we criminals now?" The human prosecutor, a lawyer named Ji-hun Park, responded, "Because for the first time, you encountered a species strong enough to stop you. Your empire was built on the weakness of others. Earth showed that your way is not inevitable. You could have chosen peace. You chose war. Now you face the consequences." Threx was found guilty on multiple counts. But instead of execution, which many expected, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 30 years. The message was clear. Earth believed in justice, not revenge. Even the architects of an attempted genocide deserved a chance at redemption someday. While the trials continued, remarkable things were happening across the former Vakrish territories. The Nethril, Korin, and Halvex species who had withdrawn from the war were granted full independence. They formed what became known as the Trinity Alliance and immediately petitioned to establish embassies on Earth. They wanted to learn more about the species that had freed them without demanding anything in. Return. Captain B. Ora Choi, now promoted to wing commander, was assigned to lead a new joint patrol fleet. Her squadron included human pilots, Nethril navigators, Korin engineers, and Halvex tactical officers. They protected former Vakrish worlds from pirates and raiders who tried to take advantage of the power vacuum. "It's strange," she told her crew during their first joint mission briefing. 6 months ago, some of you were our enemies. Now we're flying together, protecting worlds together. My brother would have liked to see this." The mixed crew worked surprisingly well. Different species brought different strengths. Nethril had natural abilities to calculate complex navigation through gravitational fields. Korin could repair systems in ways human engineers hadn't imagined. Halvex tactical thinking complemented human strategic planning perfectly. Together, they were more effective than any single species could be alone. Luna Base, scarred by the war's first battles, was converted into something new. It became the Galactic Defense Academy, where humans taught defensive tactics to other species. But it wasn't just humans teaching. Other species brought their own knowledge and skills. The Nethril taught advanced navigation. The Korin shared their engineering innovations. Even some reformed Vakrish, those who genuinely wanted to build something better, came to teach and learn. Colonel Jin Woo-on, the Marine who had led the assault on Talvex Prime, became the Academy's first commandant. "We're not training armies here," he told the first class of mixed species cadets. "We're training defenders. There's a difference. An army conquers. A defender protects. Never forget that." The students at the Academy came from 67 different species. They learned together, trained together, and formed bonds that transcended their different origins. It was exactly what Earth had hoped for when they chose mercy over conquest. 5 years after the war ended, President Sung Ho-yoon stood at Unity Point to open the first Galactic Summit. Representatives from 67 species attended, including former enemies. The station had grown into a small city in space, home to thousands of beings from across the galaxy. Dr. Hae-won Park was invited to give the keynote speech at the summit. She stood before the assembled delegates and unveiled Earth's latest invention, a quantum communication system that could transmit messages instantly across any distance. It would allow species separated by hundreds of light years to talk in real time. This technology could have been a military advantage, she said. We could have kept it secret and used it to coordinate our forces faster than any enemy. But that's not who we want to be. We're offering this technology freely to all species represented here today. Communication is the foundation of peace. We're giving you the ability to talk to each other, understand each other, and build together. The delegates from various species looked at each other in disbelief. Some were moved to tears. Others showed their species equivalent of deep emotion. A representative from a small species called the Mirren approached Dr. Hae-won after the speech. Why? The Mirren asked. Why give away such valuable technology? Because the galaxy is better when we all work together, Doctor. Hae-won replied simply. We could hoard our knowledge and be the strongest species. Or we can share and help everyone become stronger. We chose the second path. We'll never regret it. The Korvax Dominion sent observers to the summit, but did not participate officially. They watched with calculating eyes as humans built alliances through generosity instead of force. Vextar, the envoy who had offered to help humanity conquer the Vakresh, spoke with Admiral Taeyang at a private meeting. I don't understand your species, Vextar admitted. You had the power to build an empire. Instead, you're building friendships. Where is the profit? Where is the advantage? Admiral Taeyang smiled, the same smile he had shown when the Vakresh first declared war. The advantage is living in a galaxy where everyone wants to be our ally instead of our enemy. The profit is sleeping peacefully knowing we're not building something that will collapse the moment we show weakness. Empires fall. Friendships last. We're playing the long game. Vextar considered this. Perhaps the Korvax have underestimated humanity. We thought your strength was in your weapons. Our weapons are just tools, the Admiral replied. Our real strength is knowing when to use them and when to put them away. That's what makes us dangerous. We can be warriors when needed, but we can also be builders, teachers, and friends. That flexibility is more powerful than any weapon. The Korvax Dominion quietly changed its approach to humanity after that conversation. They remained militaristic, but they stopped seeing Earth as a potential target or rival. Instead, they became cautious neighbors who traded goods and shared technology at arm's length. It wasn't friendship, but it was peaceful coexistence. That was enough. 10 years after the war, Ambassador General Threx requested a meeting with President Yoon, who is now serving his final term in office. The meeting took place via quantum communication, with Threx speaking from his prison and Yoon from Earth. I've had a decade to think about what happened, Threx said, to understand where the Vakrish Empire went wrong. I wanted to ask you something. When we declared war and you smiled, did you already know how it would end? President Yoon was quiet for a moment. We knew we would survive. We'd been preparing for 80 years. We watched your empire conquer world after world. We saw the pattern. You always targeted peaceful species within 50 light years of your borders. Earth was always going to be next on your list. So we prepared. Not because we wanted war, but because we knew it was coming, and we intended to be ready. You studied us, Threx said slowly, understanding dawning. For decades, you watched and learned everything about us. Every battle you fought, Yoon confirmed. Every tactic you used. every weakness you showed. We analyzed it all. By the time you arrived at Earth, we knew you better than you knew yourselves. That's why we smiled. Not because we wanted war, but because we knew we'd win it. Threx was silent for a long time. What will you do when someone studies you the way you studied us? When another species prepares for decades to fight humanity? We'll adapt, President Yoon said. That's what humans do best. We don't rest on our victories. We keep learning, keep improving, keep preparing. But we also keep building alliances. The more friends we have, the fewer enemies we need to prepare for. That's the lesson we learned from studying you. The Vakresh Empire fell because you made enemies of everyone. We're trying to make friends with everyone. Time will tell which strategy works better in the long run. On the anniversary of the war's end, memorials were held across Earth and on Luna. Captain Biora, now Admiral Biora, commanding the Joint Defense Fleet, attended the ceremony at Luna Base, where her brother had died. A wall held the names of all humans who had fallen in the war. 89 ship crews, 317 ground forces, 406 names total. Admiral Biora touched her brother's name on the wall and spoke quietly. We did it, Minho. We won the war without becoming monsters. The galaxy is different now. Better, I think. You'd be proud of what we built. A young cadet from the Nethril species approached her. Admiral, may I ask you something? Why did humans show mercy? You could have destroyed us all. Why didn't you? Admiral Biora looked at the young Nethril, seeing genuine curiosity and gratitude. Because my brother and everyone on this wall didn't die so we could conquer the galaxy. They died defending the idea that there's a better way. That strength and mercy aren't opposites. That the strongest species should use their power to protect, not to dominate. We honored their sacrifice by living up to those ideals, even when it was hard. The cadets saluted in the Nethril style, a gesture of deep respect. Thank you. The Nethril people will never forget what humanity did for us. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening. Former enemies becoming friends. Conquered peoples becoming free. New alliances forming based on mutual respect rather than fear. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts and disagreements. But the galaxy was fundamentally different than it had been before humanity emerged as a power. 20 years after the war, Unity Point hosted a celebration. The first generation of students from the Galactic Defense Academy had graduated and were serving in mixed-species defense fleets across 67 systems. Trade routes flourished. Cultural exchanges brought art and music and literature from hundreds of worlds. Wars still happened, but they were smaller and resolved faster because both sides had access to defensive technology that made conquest impractical. Dr. Hae-Won Park, now elderly but still brilliant, gave an interview reflecting on humanity's journey. We smiled when they declared war because we knew we were ready. We'd spent 10,000 years fighting ourselves, learning from every mistake, perfecting the art of survival. The Vakresh thought they were the apex predators. They learned that humanity had been preparing for predators our entire history. But the real victory wasn't in the battles we won. It was in the peace we built afterward. Anyone can destroy. Creating something that lasts, that brings out the best in everyone involved, that's the real challenge. I'm proud that humanity chose the harder path. On Earth, a monument was built in Geneva where the war had been coordinated. It showed two figures, one human and one alien, reaching toward each other. The inscription read in 67 languages. They announced war. We chose peace. The galaxy is better for both. Admiral Tae-Yang, long retired, visited the monument and stood looking at it for a long time. A reporter asked him if he had any regrets about how the war ended. Only one, he said. I regret that we needed a war to show the galaxy what humanity could be. But I don't regret anything we did once the war started. We fought when we needed to fight. We showed mercy when we could show mercy. We built something lasting instead of something fragile. That's victory in its truest form. The galaxy had spent 10,000 years learning how to conquer. Humanity spent 10,000 years learning how to survive. In the end, survival meant knowing when to fight, when to defend, and when to build. The Vakresh declared war, expecting slaves. Humanity gave them partners instead. The galaxy was shocked. Then it was grateful. Then it was changed forever. And when new species reached the stars and asked about humanity, they heard the same story told in hundreds of languages across thousands of worlds. They announced war on Earth, and humanity smiled back. Not because humans wanted war, but because they were ready for it. And when the war ended, humanity proved that being ready to fight didn't mean you had to become a conqueror. That's what made humanity truly dangerous. Not their weapons or their tactics or their technology. Their greatest weapon was knowing that true strength meant building something worth protecting. And they protected it not just for themselves, but for everyone.